Storms, earthquakes, and that kind of thing, which have hit the Caribbean over the past, 8 years or so. And we found that there weren't enough resources, especially to deal with the psychological trauma as a result of these disasters. We found that especially the elderly and children were not being taken care of, and as a result, they can suffer long-term trauma. So I was engaged in, working with some counseling programs, both in Guyana and in Jamaica, to help, establish, counseling services for disaster victims. And as I said, what I found is that the resources are not there because that's not seen as a priority. There's more interest in structural rebuilding rather than the psychological impact. So there's some changes now. There's more attention to that kind of thing. The other thing I found is that the persons who try to help with the psychological impact of disasters are untrained. They're not trained. And sometimes, even though they mean well, sometimes if a person is untrained, they can do more harm than good in terms of, people getting better and to deal with the disaster. So that's something that we're working on. And I'm involved with the Caribbean Social Workers Association in developing programs to deal with things like after.
Why do you keep doing this thing? It's a lot of work. It's very involved. It's very demanding.
Yeah.
Why are you so committed?
I think it goes right back to my upbringing. My parents really encouraged, always, regardless of where you go, what you do, how high you get in life, you always give back.
Always give back.
So that is something that's, and you do it in a very humble way.
Yes.
And so,
we can't, no matter how strong and powerful we are, no matter how motivated we are, we can't ignore the human condition.
Right.
And so those days when you don't feel like doing what you do, who or what gets you out of that mindset?
That's rare.
It's rare. I'm glad to hear that.
That's rare. I can't imagine myself without that desire. Of course, some days you'll be more hyper about it than other days, but it's always there.
It's always there. Is there a gratification that you get?
Oh yeah, a sense of doing and sharing and helping. That's.
There's a quote by Maya Angelou, which you like. You can never go home again, but the truth is, you can never leave home. So it's all right. And yet it is innate in human nature to try to go home again. And it may in fact be what life is all about. Getting back to home, back to death, and then out of death and back to life. Why does this resonate with you?
Because that's the thing that keeps us going as human beings. So
Yes.
that's the element of sustenance, I think. Knowing that home is there, we may never go back. There are two interpretations of that.
Right.
We cannot go back to exactly where we were, what we call home. But we can go back psychologically.
Yes.
We can go back culturally. Yes. We can go back imaginatively.
Yes.
And to me, that helps to sustain, keep us going. So there's the inability to go back physically in some cases. But there's also the ability to actually go back to what was,
Yeah.
right? And my thing is that what is what was now.
What is what was now.
Yes.
I like that.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Because it may not be it may not be the same
Right.
physically,
Yeah.
but the aura and the feeling connected.
Do you think an organization like Ghana Cultural Association is able to open that bridge between what was now is?
So they have been.
Mhm.
They have been. It hasn't been an easy road for them, but they've been doing
How
that.
important is an organization like Ghana Cultural Association?
Oh, very, very, very important in not only retaining cultural elements,
Yeah.
but helping people to really enjoy uh, the essence of who they are
Mhm.
and who they were. And I think the organization is really important in keeping that connection. And the good thing that one of the things I admire about the organization is not all about the arts. Arts are important.
Yes.
It's also about intellectual conversation and keeping elements of the culture, not only the arts, but the food,
Yes.
and that kind of thing. Keep that. That's very important.
Mr. UC Kwayana urges various agencies, organizations, and activists should begin to plan a response to Professor Matthews' comments on the effects of violence in our communities. Why is this important, and how would you like to see this unfold, as dialogue or just commentaries?
As both.
As both.
As both. As
Mhm.
both. UC was reacting to some comments I made when there was a spike in the violence in Guyana,
Mm.
like in 2006, and it was affecting the children especially. It was
Mhm.
really traumatizing children. And I made some comments about the importance of looking at that and avoiding that, and really paying attention to the impact of violence on children. That's what you will see.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When are you most happy, Professor?
When am I most happy?
Mhm.
When I'm writing.
When you're writing?
When I'm writing.
Oh,
And of course with my family.
with your family?
Yeah.
What would you say you've gotten wrong, and what have you gotten right through the years, through your career?
Gotten wrong. Think about that one.
All right.
What I've gotten wrong was, I think, my assumption
Uh-huh.
that that everyone should have a sense of his or her roots, and that's important to them.
Mm.
I've gotten that wrong in the sense that there's some people who, at least on the outside, say that they don't want anything to do with where they're from. This is now,
Mm.
right? And it's not that I got it. I don't think it's much that I've gotten it wrong, but it upsets me.
It upsets you.
Because of how
Yes.
I am.
Yes. What are you hoping will come out of the biennial conference of Caribbean social work educators scheduled for July this year in Grenada?
Yeah. Well, this is as you said, a biennial conference. It's been happening since 1993. Every 2 years, and I think I missed one, and it takes place in different countries in the Caribbean. I hope that there will be a sense of and recognition of the needs for certain improvement of certain social services within the Caribbean.
Mhm.
That the curriculum can begin to the curriculum at UWI, for example, and University of Guyana, and in some of the other colleges, begin to address seriously um, some of the social issues and not only be locked into, say, clinical work. There should be a broader community development perspective. Even though the Caribbean has been more into community development and community services than clinical work, I hope that they can merge the two. In other words, and that more resources are placed in agencies to not only to develop their services, but for practitioners to develop a better sense of professionalism. There's no licensure program in the Caribbean. I think Jamaica is now looking at that. And by that I mean, in the United States, for example, in order to be a professional service provider, professional social worker, you have to be licensed, you have to be certified. In the Caribbean, even though there are folks who are trained in human services and social work, there's no licensing procedure, and therefore certain standards are not being kept up. And if there are no standards, that can affect the quality of care and the effectiveness of care. So that's something I would want to.
If you had a chance to go back in time, what would you tell your 16-year-old self?
What I told my 60-year-old self when I was 16, based on my parents' upbringing and socialization, to be humble, to work hard. So
that's it. And looking back on the long arc of your career, what would you do different if you had to do this again?
I would probably be more serious about my academic development.
Yeah, okay.
I was sort of carefree about that at one time. One of the things I want to mention, and this is something I share with the young people.
Yes.
When I came to the United States the first time was during summer break from Inter-American University in Puerto Rico. And, you get a summer break for the 2.5 months. And you want to hustle a job.
Yes.
And the job that I got the very first time I came to the United States was cleaning a store on 34th Street. I was a cleaner. I was a janitor, actually. And one day I was, there are these stores in the subway, it's like there's street level, then there's another level, and then there's stores.
Yes.
And then there's a subway. So I used to work in one of these stores. And one day I was sweeping the store. I was sweeping right in the front door and so on. And I almost swept the feet of a woman. When I looked up, it was my primary school teacher. And my point about talking about this is that I wasn't embarrassed. I dropped the broom and I hugged her, right? I hugged her and had a gap and so on. And I picked up my broom and I continued after we had a chat. I hadn't seen her since primary school.
Wow.
Mrs. Gilbert, I always remember that. And she was going to her job.
Yeah.
Back. And I use that as an example when I'm talking to young people, that you should have pride in whatever you do, right? And it didn't matter what I was doing. I mean, I was a college student, I wasn't embarrassed.
Right. Pride.
Pride, right. And so I talk to them about that kind of thing. I'm sure other immigrants have similar stories, but that's one that I use.
What makes you laugh out loud?
Oh, Guyanese jokes. Guyanese jokes.
Well, I have to say thank you for coming on CWS.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. You're welcome. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And that thing we discussed early on about the program on CWS as it is, to come back with as a panel.
Sure.
Yes,
definitely.
I would really like that, so we can discuss this book more.
And we get some more perspectives also.
Exactly.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, good night.
Good night.
And this is Selwyn Collins saying, fear not what fear whispers to you, fear your obedience to it.